かのように侍は
So, a common misconception I see a lot is the belief that samurai movies peaked in the 50s and 60s. And some actually believe that the genre died with the director Akira Kurosawa, one of the greatest directors of all time. Kurosawa might have mastered the genre, but the genre by no means died with him. In fact, there's been some of the best samurai films in recent years. And these are most notably adaptations of the writer Shuhei Fujisawa. And I really believe that he writes the best samurai films out of anyone. I'd even call him the greatest Japanese author. So because of that, for this video, I'll be talking exclusively about every one of his films. And I'll go over what I really like about them. So this will be a ranking from worst to best. And also, it's easy to own any of these films. They're all on SamuraiDVD.com. And you could also use the discount code Bushido Blues, get yourself a nice discount. So let's not waste any more time. These are samurai films that everyone should watch. Enjoy. So first on the list we have Swordsman for Hire. And I'm placing this one last because just when you compare it to all of his other films, this one doesn't really fit in at all. And it is a bit unfair because the problem lies mostly with just its low budget and it being sort of outdated. It did release in '89 compared to the others, which are 2000s and 2010 films. And it just looks very low budget, and there was just definitely no hiding that. One day I may decide to give this one another chance, but just going by the first time when I watched it, it just really failed to grab my attention. Anyway, the story follows a samurai that witnessed his chief retainer's plot to murder their lord. So he decides to run away and just lose himself in the streets of Edo. By day, he sells his sword skills to the highest bidder. But by night, he fights off these deadly swordsmen that his clan sends to silence him. And next we have Yamazakura. So this was one I remember I was just really excited to see, and that's because it features one of my favorite Japanese actors, someone I believe is extremely underrated. And unfortunately he's not in many films, but I found out the reason for that, and it's because he sort of retired from acting. Apparently it was because of a scandal in the industry. And basically, he didn't do anything, but he was forced to take the blame for someone higher up. Which is actually very samurai-like. And that's just unfortunate, and I just wish this guy was in more stuff. Anyway, this film was just okay. And that's because it really wasn't too memorable. And when I look back at it, nothing really sticks out too much. But I do remember it being a very beautiful looking film. So I'd definitely like to just revisit this. I did remember it having one or two decent fights, but majority of it was political drama, and again, nothing very memorable. And also I remember the ending kind of lacking, which is really sad because Fujisawa usually has the best endings. Anyway, the story in this one follows a rather uneasy life of this woman, and she's really the main character. She has this difficult family that she's being married into against her will, and this was after her former husband passed away. But one day, as she was trying to just break off this branch of a cherry tree, she is aided by a samurai whom she doesn't recognize. but he recognizes her. And it turns out that he's this really skilled swordsman, and he actually teaches other samurai. But while this is going on, the powerful new chief retainer of the village is enacting these land policies that threaten the survival of the local farmers. So again, it's an okay political story, a little different from what we're used to, but overall, again, not a very memorable film, but still worth checking out.
あとはわしに任せろ。
And next we have After the Flowers. So this is a film for anyone that wants a realistic Lady Snowblood. And that's mainly just because it focuses on a skilled female swordsman. And honestly, normally I don't really care for films like this, just because they usually come across as too fantasy-like and unrealistic. But luckily, this film keeps it a lot more realistic. And I will say I definitely enjoyed the way this film was done. There is still some unrealistic moments, like a woman just taking on multiple swordsmen, but at least they make it look good and partially believable. And that's really all I can ask for. And if any other films want to have strong females that are good swordsmen, then they really should take some notes from this film. So the story for this one follows the daughter of a clan official, and she's learned all of her fencing skills from her father. She then meets a low-ranking samurai, but he's also known as a highly skilled swordsman. And of course they meet beneath this beautiful blooming cherry tree. This is typical Fujisawa. And she's already challenged and beaten all the other students at his dojo. Of course, she does it the day he wasn't there. They agree to meet for a match, the two expert swordsmen face off, and somehow this ultimately leads to just a bloody upheaval, and just treachery of the worst kind. Next we have a Duel Tale. So this is a film that was such a pleasant surprise. And that's because Tatsuya Nakadai is really just a childhood favorite of mine. And you could even call him a role model. I, like many people, first saw him in Kurosawa films, and I always thought he was just excellent in them. He's an awesome actor, but he's really a legend when it comes to samurai films. And this was the first time that I saw him older. And I like the role that they gave him in this one. It shows that you could still be a badass even at an older age. And this is a concept that I always like just because, we all get old eventually, and it really is just a great message. And the story follows Nakadai, and he plays an older samurai that's labeled a Heizumi, which essentially means a freeloader. And he has this one last chance to help his grandniece escape from this cruel samurai. So definitely check this one out, especially if you're a Nakadai fan. I highly recommend it. And next we have Love and War of a Samurai. So this is actually a 5-hour series, but there's also a theatrical cut of it. But I just recommend watching the full series, and that's because it just gives you more character development. And that character development's gonna help because this is a coming-of-age story. So we see different characters at different stages in their lives. And a full series just allows you to really appreciate that more. And I'd like to add that this is Merlin's favorite Fujisawa film. And this is the owner of SamuraiDVD.com. And just knowing that it's his favorite, I really should revisit it soon. But this is just gonna go off of my memory of the first time I saw it. Plus I have a review of it. And I did like it the first time I watched it. The only problem is that it looks like a television series. And I mean that as in it looks like it's for television. So it lacks that polish of the other films on this list. But this also goes for the choreography. It's rather simple, it's not too impressive, and that's always an aspect in samurai films that I look for, and I'm sure many of you also do. Still, I'm gonna definitely recommend this film. I'm gonna say it's definitely worth the time commitment of just watching the full series. Because when you watch it, it actually does keep your interest throughout the whole thing. And there's something powerful about seeing characters that are kids and then again when they're adults. It makes you care more about them and actually feel like you know them more. And also, I'm just always a sucker for a good friendship story. I believe friendship is just one of the greatest things. So, the story of this one follows a samurai whose father was forced to commit seppuku, and this is after being falsely implicated in a plot to take over the clan. And it really just shows you the humiliation that the family faces because of this event. But you, of course, learn that there's a lot more to the story, and maybe not everything is true. And there's also a pretty nice love story in this. I don't say that often. So definitely check this one out. And next we have Fox Dancing in the Dusk. So this is the latest film to release, and it's also the most recent review I did, so it's still fresh in my mind. But what I love about this one is that it's a samurai heist movie. And I just think that alone is just a great concept. It follows this team of misfits just coming together and they want to steal some gold. And it's all led by this older man who's this mastermind behind it. There's also a young samurai and he's got a violent past. So no one in this is really good, but you still root for them. I mean, sure, it's a similar heist concept that we've seen before, but I will say I've never seen it told in this way. And I definitely wish there was more films like this, samurai heist movies, that should be its own genre. So let's hopefully get more of them. The only thing I'll add though is that it is slow in the beginning, like many of the films on this list. It takes about 50 minutes before you get to the actual heists. But Fujisawa just handles slow build-up so well. So by the time you get to the big climax, it really pays off. Anyway, definitely check this one out. And next we have The Return. So this one goes really well with the other film on this list, a Duel Tale. And that's because this one also features an older Tetsuya Nakadai. And once again, we get to see him playing a samurai at an older age. But out of the two, I'm going to say I prefer this one more. And for one, it's because Nakadai plays a more badass character in this one. But I also felt that this one had a better payoff in the end. And it also had a duel that was really well done. It kind of showed what a duel would be like between two, older samurai. And it's really impressive how Nakadai is just able to do some of these real stunts at an older age. We see him fall down and he's fine. He definitely put some work into making this film, and I gotta give it to him. And like with the other film too, this one was a for-television movie. But it in no way looks cheap or anything. In fact, it's actually filmed pretty well. The story itself follows a traveling gambler known as Funeral Una. He is now 86 years old, and he's returning to his hometown for the first time in 30 years. And the story is told partly in flashbacks, and eventually he's forced to fight his lifelong nemesis. And this is a Yakuza who's portrayed by another superstar of samurai cinema. That's Nakamura Atsuwa. But before the two old gamblers can settle this 30-year-old score, they must put their lives on the line in a game of dice. And it's one that could even lead to a bloody sword duel. I won't spoil it, but definitely check this one out. And next we have the Hidden Blade. So just going forward, I'm going to say that these next films are all great, and they were kind of tough to rank. So just keep in mind that any one of these films could trade places. And eventually we'll get to Fujisawa's most famous film, which is the Twilight Samurai. But the Hidden Blade was done by the same director, Yoji Yamada. And there was actually 3 samurai films that he made, and people call it the Yoji Yamada trilogy. And none of them follow the same story, but each one of them has to do with samurai in the end days of the feudal system. And I've already seen all these films, but I did rewatch them for this ranking. And I will say that The Hidden Blade was really interesting to revisit because I forgot just how much humor is in this film. And it definitely has more than any of the other films on this list. So it's definitely memorable for that. And this film does have one of the best payoffs in the end. Actually, most of these last ones have really good ones, but this one is really good, I'll say, and you definitely don't want it spoiled. But it also has one of the best samurai duels in cinema. But my only problem is that this film uses some pretty horrible CGI, and it just completely ruins any immersion. I already just hate CGI, and I don't believe it has any use in samurai films. But why they decided to use such a fake looking one for this is really beyond me, because nothing else in this film really uses anything like that. So it feels very out of place and it's impossible to ignore. But luckily it's only used once and everything else is just done so well. The story for this one follows a low-ranking retainer, and this is during the introduction of modern Western influence into Japan. A clan member is charged with plotting to overthrow the shogunate, so it falls upon the clan's strongest swordsman to execute this rebel. Ironically, it's someone from his own dojo, and it was the only opponent that was ever able to beat him in a match. So it definitely creates a lot of anticipation for this fight. But luckily for the protagonist, he has a secret technique. It's called the Hidden Blade. Find out if he uses it on his friends, or does he find a different method to defeat him. Anyway, definitely check this one out. And next we have Sword of Desperation. So, the first time I saw this one, I was actually kind of mad. And that's because I just finished making a ranking video covering the best fight scenes. And of course, this film just happened to have one of the best duels I've ever seen in cinema. But when you watch this, don't expect it for a while. This is once again a slow build-up of a film. And when it finally happens, it is quite unexpected, so I really won't say much more than that. But this is definitely just a samurai film that more people should see and talk about. I believe it's a classic. The story itself follows an expert swordsman. He publicly assassinates his lord's favorite concubine. But instead of being decapitated for this crime, he is sentenced to a solitary confinement for 1 year. Then he's ordered to serve as the Lord's bodyguard. Anyway, this is just an exciting tale of honor, intrigue, and deception. And inevitably, it all leads to bloodshed. Definitely check it out. And next we have the Twilight Samurai. So, quite a few people will often praise this film, and it's easily the most famous film on this list. And you'll always see this mentioned in any top 10 lists. But I could definitely see why. It's no doubt a very well-made film. It's memorable, great cinematography, a great score, There isn't too many fights or action, but the two fights in it are some of the best and most iconic fights ever filmed. And the choreography is just done in such a simple yet realistic and exciting way. Also, I'm always just surprised by how slow paced this one is, but it's very methodical in the way it does it. It allows the viewer to just fully take in this world and this sympathetic main character, and you really feel for it. And it's definitely one of my favorite characters I've ever seen told, and he's really just brought to life by the legendary acting of Hiroyuki Sanada. It's great just seeing him now, just so young. This is compared to seeing him in the new Shogun series. He really is just a brilliant actor. Anyway, if you haven't seen this film for some reason, you definitely have to. Everyone does. It's a classic. And next we have Love and Honor, also titled The Poison Taster. And this is the third film in director Yoji Yamada's Samurai trilogy. And all these films are amazing, but I believe this one is the best. For one, it's just a unique type of story that we're not used to. And it's about a job that no one really thinks about. And that is poison tasters. These were men that just tasted food for poison before it could be served to someone of a higher rank. Which is really an interesting concept because it shows just how certain jobs require a person to risk their life for someone else. And I won't give too much away with what happens, but I'll just say that it has one of the best depictions of a blind swordsman. And it also has one of the most tense fights where I actually was nervous. So this film should definitely just be a classic. I'm not sure why it's not mentioned more. And I believe it's the director's best film and his masterpiece. So definitely you don't want to miss this one. And last on the list we have At River's Edge. So like I said, any one of these films could be at the top spot. They're all excellent. But I decided to give it to this film because, for me, it's the most powerful. And it hit me the most on an emotional level. So the story itself focuses on this main character who's a very skilled swordsman. And right away, it begins with him being ordered to kill another skilled swordsman that only he has the skill to defeat. And we find out that's because they actually both sparred before. But they were both equal in skill because they both won a match and lost a match. But the main problem is that it's his brother-in-law that he has to kill. And that means that his sister might get involved. So this creates the dilemma of him wanting to fight this guy without harming his family member. And as you would know, not everything goes according to plan, but there's other surprises and complications, and you'll just have to watch it to find out. So when you look at it, it is a rather simple premise. Some people have watched this and they said it was average, but I believe that they're overlooking it and just not seeing the full picture. They're not seeing the true story of what it's telling. And really, you could get a lot out of this film. It's like art. And as you know, the simplest of art oftentimes is the greatest. And that's how I describe this. And this film really is just beautiful. It has beautiful cinematography, scenery, beautiful music. I really love the soundtrack. And maybe that's all this film is. It's great music and great visuals. And because of that, you feel something. But when I rewatched it, I was actually surprised just by how much more there is to it. It really is a deep film. And I'd love to just make another video about it. The basic plot in this is there for the average viewer, so anyone can really enjoy this film. But for the other kind of viewer that likes to look more into the deeper message, this film has that too. And that's what I believe the best kind of film has. It's simple on paper, so anyone can enjoy it, but there's also more to it than that. And I just love certain moments in this, like the flashbacks, and we get to know these main characters as kids and then adults. And really, there's some foreshadowing scenes that I didn't notice until this viewing. And I've seen this film a few times now, and I just love it more and more every time I see it. But I like how it shows just the role of the samurai. And by the end of the day, we see just how difficult it really is. It's not easy to be a samurai. But it also shows just how equally difficult it could be to be the samurai's wife. You know, something we don't always think about. So again, there's just a lot to this film. I really enjoyed revisiting it, and I was just blown away by it. And it does get better and better the more you watch it. Anyway, I'm just really glad I made this list. And I really hope you at least watch, one or two of these films. I think you'd really enjoy them. And if you need help finding any one of these films, again, they're all on SamuraiDVD.com. I'll provide a link in the description. Once again, you can use the code BushidoBlues at checkout. Get yourself a nice discount. And, like always, thanks for watching.